recording it. I don't want to lose any potential
Blooper material. Is that what we're looking for?
hold open. Yeah.
Is there
Um,
bloopers of bloopers?
we do have bloopers of bloopers. It's the
Yes.
pre-recording of the
How
bloopers.
meta.
It's very meta. Yeah. I did a post on LinkedIn the other day. I said, why did Elon call uh, change the name of Twitter to X?
I'm waiting.
You
I
have
am
to say
too.
why. You have to say why.
Why?
Why, John?
Because Meta was taken. It
Oh.
was funny about 5 minutes ago. All right, put yourself down, man. Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show. Welcome, everybody, to a brand new and live edition, because, well, we're not dead, Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. Wilbot, how are you?
Oh, I'm bopping right along. How are you?
You seem to be bopping right along.
Yeah,
Let's hope
I'm
you
perky today.
pick up the energy. Yeah, a little bit. Your eyes are a little. There you go. Your
That's going to be hard to do for the full
for the
show.
whole show. Your burrowed eyebrows were a little more burrowed than usual. So smile. You're having fun. That's my point. All right. Guess what episode this is? I had to just tell him a minute ago, but yeah.
You did tell me, but you want me to act surprised?
Yeah. We'll
I
say
can't
what it is.
imagine, John, what episode is this?
40.
You know, that used to be over the hill.
It used to be. Well, we are officially a middle-aged podcast. Well, at least in
Are.
terms of episodes.
Yeah.
But
And I'm the midlife crisis, so I'm here for that.
you are. Oh, I like participating in banter. Hurrah!
Yes.
Hurrah!
Razor sharp wit on this one.
Yeah. So, Will, I think the over and under for us was probably about 5.2. So we're
Episodes?
at 40.
Yeah.
So, did anybody have us in DraftKings? Ooh,
I bet on us.
sponsor opportunity. DraftKings. Everybody say it.
DraftKings, we're here.
DraftKings.
Excellent.
We will happily accept sponsorship dollars.
We will cut that in somewhere. All right.
Maybe if we agree to gamble the sponsorship dollars they give us, that will increase the likelihood.
Interesting.
What an entrepreneur.
Yes. Okay. What else do we have? All right. Well, okay. So last week, which is going to come out in about 4 or so weeks, because we're going to
Yes.
be on August break. We talked about we're going to do a live show and a panel show.
Yes.
I'm working on both, so you'll just show up as usual. But our friends Jason at Earfluence have given us the room in the Commons that we can do our panel show from there. So we're actually going to do everyone in the same room panel show. Very excited.
That's awesome. Forgive my ignorance. What is the Commons?
The Commons used to be called Industrious. It was a co-working space in the Wells Fargo building, and it switched over for some reason, and now it's called the Commons. But Jason and Earfluence, potential sponsor opportunity, have a podcast room, beautiful, in there. So we're going to use that.
That's the Wells Fargo building.
That is correct, in downtown Raleigh.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Commons, it just sounds like a quad or something on a college campus.
I think that was probably on purpose.
Yeah.
Probably.
See if they can get the right decor so you can be between two ferns. I always feel like that's a fun.
Yes.
I'm in the Commons between the hedges.
We're between the hedges. And the last thing I'll say is, Will, what did I text you just before the show?
That there was an software update, and I needed to log on and go ahead and click that and get that.
And what do you think I was looking for in the update?
A button that could mute me.
Well, that's already have that. Here's a hint.
Is this a real one?
No, there was supposed to be a pointer. You
Did
have
they
to read
promise
my
you that
mind.
in the update, or you were hoping for that in the
I
update?
was hoping for it,
Oh,
and
I
I don't know
see.
what the hell they came up with, but there's no pointer. So, Lauren, this is a running beef with me. They made this beautiful software that we use, and there's no pointer, so I can't point to the slides. We had to come
Ah.
up with this silly thing, which is perfectly fine, but it's not
It's
a
yeah.
pointer.
It's a piece of artwork you have to click
Yeah.
on and
Yeah.
then drag, and it gets hung up in the slide sometimes, and it's a
It
little
isn't great. And in their other software, they have the most beautiful pointer of all time. And I don't know why this
Wow.
one can't have it.
But there's an opportunity here. You could make like a little will that could be the pointer, just
That
like
is
a
true.
little cutout. Just
It's not sharp enough.
ah.
Nor am I. I think what you're saying, John, is that there's no point in an update without a pointer, right? That was punny.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.
I got more dad jokes for you if you're
It's
in the
not
mood.
going to get any better than that. I'm John
No,
Lane,
I'm Will Barfield.
and we are a
A
work
work
in
in
progress. Nice to see everybody today. We have our smiling guest, Lauren. Why don't you introduce yourself and talk about that badass motorcycle you're on?
Yeah, so my name is Lauren McCullough. Thanks for having me. So, I guess kind of brief intro. I have spent the last decade in the startup world in one
Neat.
capacity or another. I came down to North Carolina, Durham specifically in late 2015. Started working for a startup, worked at NC Idea, which some of you may know, and then have kind of floated back and forth in different roles. Will and I met, I think John also, when I was doing some fractional work, doing kind of a fractional VP of growth, fractional CRO type of stuff for really B2B software companies that were trying to like create repeatability, I guess,
Yeah.
in some of their processes. That awkward gap between founder-led sales and I need to actually hire an exec.
Yeah.
And so the last couple of years, I have been working more so on my own ventures. So last year, with my wife, I launched a small business that I never thought I would be involved in, which is a spa in downtown Durham.
Yes.
So random. And that's been going really well. So we've really branded ourselves on providing inclusive spaces, really trying to kind of mix up this, what we feel is a little bit more of a whitewashed approach to wellness. So we're really excited. We just got officially announced that we won Best New Business in Durham County from Indie Weeks. That was a really cool win. But what really takes up most of my time these days is I'm starting a company called Trommel, which is a B2B software company, right? My sweet spot that is focused on e-commerce technology for automotive aftermarket sellers is really our beachhead market. And so what we're working on is instead of just an analytics platform, we really want to position this as an insights platform. Because what we found working in this market is that sellers, basically everyone was solving the problem of how much money am I making? Where am I making money by just throwing charts and graphs at very busy people? And so what we want to do is kind of reverse engineer that and say, okay, what do you actually need to know? And then how can we give you really accurate, reliable, complete data to deliver that to your inbox or wherever you're spending your time? So we launched this early this year. We have a couple customers on board right now. So we're working on kind of scaling up our efforts with that. Got some exciting news coming down that I can't officially announce yet in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, we'll be ramping up later this year and into next year.
Congratulations. I spent some time in the automotive industry, and there's some interesting challenges in that space. So
Absolutely.
I wish you a good luck. Okay.
Thank you.
Where'd the name come from?
Yeah.
So actually, it's a fun story. So it's my co-founder's brainchild. It is the piece of equipment in a gold mining operation that separates all the dirt from the little gold nuggets. So it's actually TROMMEL, but took out the E. So yeah, it's like, think about if you were, out west and you were dumping just mountains and mountains of dirt, like we do data, into a position. How do you find the tiny little gold nuggets that you actually can act on every day?
Love that.
Yeah.
Really cool. I didn't even know that you were doing that, as if you didn't have enough going on. So congratulations for another
Thank
plate
you.
to spin.
Thank you.
Good.
It's my default.
So
That's for sure.
today, like every week, leadership traits under stress.
Mm-hmm.
Will people come up to me on the street? They ask
I've
me,
seen it happen.
"Hey, John, where do you get the leadership traits under stress from?" And we give them the same answer every week, which is it's magic. Actually, it's not magic. We use our OAD assessment, which unlocks and defines your superpowers. And it is a very easy to use 5-minute assessment that will surface deep and meaningful insights and also work with other 360 and other HR components. But today, it's used to produce what we call the OAD Leadership Style Matrix. Say that 3 times fast. And let's get into it. So OAD has created a simplified way to help understand some of the complexities of our software or our assessment, excuse me. We call it the OAD Leadership Matrix. It's 4 quadrants, there's 13 traits. We look at specifically the differences between generalists and specialists, socially oriented people and technically oriented people. I, for instance, am a socially oriented generalist in the builder quadrant, and I'm a what, Will?
You are a negotiator.
Thank you. And you are a
Technically oriented generalist.
in the
architect.
And the
I am a developer.
Correct.
That's one of the cleaner adjectives that's been used to describe me.
Correct. And then our friend Lauren, interesting profile. She is a socially oriented generalist. She's in the builder quadrant, and she is an adventurer. And I think perhaps our first adventurer. I'd have to go back and check, but
definitely do. But it couldn't be more accurate.
We have some things to talk about as an adventurer. So let us get into this. Okay.
Well, the show's not over.
Should I hit record? Okay, so I'm going to do this real quick, and then we'll ask you a question first. Let's stay in order.
Okay, Lauren, how did it feel to invest 5 to 10 minutes in the online assessment and to have everything about you reduced here into a 2-dimensional table?
Perfect.
It's interesting because you feel like you're answering all these diverse questions. And, I've taken a couple other, I've never taken this assessment before, but I've taken a couple others. And to your point, I typically fall in this like very big outlier. And so it was interesting to just be like, yeah, it's weird. I just like answered 30 questions or something like that. And that feels pretty accurate.
Yeah. And just to be clear, there were no questions. All you did was select from a list of adjectives.
That's right.
You picked the ones that you felt represented you the best.
Yeah.
And then there's some science and stuff in the back end to get people from not taking the assessment in good faith. But let's go through this. So what I like about the adventurer trait pattern is that it's just all ballsy, right? It's high A, E, P, D. The opposite of a adventurer, because I know you were going to ask me, is the perfectionist, which goes the same way this way, but going the other way. And I think one of the best ways to define the adventurer is to say it's the exact opposite of a perfectionist. Because I think we all have this concept of what a perfectionist is. But your dominant traits are your A and your E. So we know they're to the right of the D, which makes you adventurer and social. Your patience is low, and your detail orientations is even lower. Now, low and high aren't bad and good, etc., but it just means you are very venturesome. You're comfortable with ambiguity. You're willing to take risks. And at the same time, you're open. You're amiable. You're social. You like selling and persuading type of activities more than technical and analytical. You're pretty darn urgent and comfortable with change, and you're never going to put your expense reports in on time. It's just not going to happen. So,
hey, John, question. I love this straight line profile. Lauren, if you look, you see that hash mark, that red one at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The definition between dominant and subordinate. Is there anything about this particular readout, John? Why that, or what's interesting with that E being so far away from the A and also being subordinate technically?
Yeah, it is interesting, and we don't usually get this deep, but this is but I'll do it anyway. So usually with upper right builders, the median line is between the P and the E.
Yeah.
But her assertiveness trait is so high, it's pulling the number line over, but it's making the E to be on the subordinate side and closer to the end than to the beginning of the line.
Yeah.
Which means that if we read her profile, unlike certain other builders, she actually has a bit more analytical communication style, even though she's technically in the socially oriented one. So that is a good call out. And that E is usually a little more to the right.
Yeah.
Even though the AD-ED pairing is still, A is greater than D, generalist, E is greater than D, socially oriented. Her readout has her as more technical.
Well, what you said there was great about the analytical.
Yeah.
Right. Because in my
Better
interactions
word,
with Lauren, in her communication, that has been the case. And when you think about what she does for a living, particularly on the software and tech and consulting side, very
Yeah.
much about data. And she just talked about a new company she's launching that's about data. So it's I think that variation, and it's not technically a
Interesting,
variation,
yeah.
but that aberration there with
Analytical,
her
yeah.
fits the personality style I've interacted with as a fellow professional.
Yeah.
I'm a semi-professional. She's a professional.
Yeah. That's a very good call. That relatively lower E does sort of ooch her more on the analytical communication style, even though technically she's a socially oriented generalist. So great. That was a good breakdown, Will. Great question. Lauren, we're going to now begin to show you some of the generic builder adventurer traits. And this could be interesting because some of these may not apply to you because of what Will brought up vis-a-vis
Mhm.
the lower E. But Will, jump in, please.
Will do. So, Lauren, anyone who lands in the upper right quadrant
Got it.
as a builder adventure is going to get these generic superpowers as a readout. Anyone. And
Mm.
depending on your profile and how it lines up with typical or not, they may or may not be all as accurate. But when you look at those, they're very big now, John.
Yeah, I can't find my pointer. Sorry,
I'm,
you weren't
I'm
supposed to notice any of it.
oh,
Come on, Will.
and then when I don't pay attention, you
I
say,
know it's
"Come
my
on, Will."
fault.
Right? So
It's
what
always
do I
my
do
fault.
here? Which of those descriptors, from a superpower standpoint, Lauren, either really hits home for you, or others have mentioned when talking about you?
Yeah. So I think the one that kind of stands out to me is the firefighter one, right? Is just being able to like react and try to figure out things that are completely out of scope. I think that as much as that like heightens your stress, that is probably something I, to an extent, enjoy. And something that I'm pretty good at managing. So that would be one I think that definitely stands out for me.
Very cool.
Good one. Let's switch to the kryptonite. So again, generics. You may not feel passionately about all of these, but grab one.
I mean, there's definitely a couple. I would say the like impatience one. Like I am so impatient and I have to check myself on it all the time is, trying to wait on things to kind of play out is not my strong suit. When I was opening the spa, we had a bunch of just construction delays and I still rank that as like one of the most stressful moments of my life because I had no control to fix it. So that one is just consumes my being.
Yeah, and that's definitely one that would not be thrown off, Will, by where the E is placed. That AP relationship is strong. It's strong in her. Like
it is.
Force.
No, and you identified something there, Lauren. Did you know that construction and delays are actually synonyms?
I figured that out.
It's a joke parade.
Doesn't matter what you're building. If you're just laying 4 boards on the ground,
oh my gosh,
it's
that was crazy.
3 times longer than you thought.
Oh yeah,
and more expensive. All right.
Yes.
So now we're getting the good stuff.
So this is where Lauren, did her homework, right, and looked at the results and the readout, and then made some comments on herself. Talk us through these bullets, Lauren. John noted earlier before the show about how well written and detailed your responses were, and he had to truncate them a bit to get them, on the slide. But feel free to talk in volume about these points here and why you feel they're superpowers, or why other people would call them out as superpowers for you.
Yeah. So I think the first one, assertive, is always an interesting one for me. And it kind of plays out the same way that I read when I see things that are, say, self-confidence, because I don't feel that in my being. Like when I sit there and I'm trying to be honest with myself of conversations, I don't particularly feel assertive. I don't feel self-confident. But what I think I realized, so I've been pretty much working in the tech startup world my whole life. And I remember my first job out of college I was, pretty much the only female, 20 years younger than everyone. So if you're more assertive, no one listened, right? So you were either like loud or irrelevant. And so I think that for me, that's one that I think about these traits. It's like, which one is natural to me and which one did I have to learn in survival? And I think that that's one that definitely sticks out in that. And I think being a female is a big part of that, but also typically being younger than most of the people I'm around has been a big part of that. And it's just this very interesting, like, things that feel at odds often with how I feel and how I act.
Interesting. Well, I'll just interject here for a second and say, you told us that you're assertive, right? By picking the adjectives you picked. But it's interesting that your conscious mind may describe yourself, as you just did, as not feeling assertive or self-confident. And yet when you picked the adjectives, you told us that you were assertive.
Yeah. Well, I think because I put work mode on, right? Yeah, and especially if, John, if you're doing sales and stuff, you have to, especially doing sales for startups, you have to radiate confidence of things that you have absolutely no idea are going to work. So it is just that habitual nature where if I was to take this as a completely personal thing, right? If I wasn't wearing my work hat, I wonder if I would have answered differently if I wasn't in that mode.
Good point.
So, yeah, and I think for the others, like, so yesterday, or, done yesterday is good, but spikes my anxiety. I think that that's a big one for me, is always trying to juggle this, and it's, again, trying to build companies and never kind of being satisfied with status quo. It's that lack of patience, I think, that comes in. And I think that that's good as a driver, because it makes things move fast. It makes us never get settled. But I do recognize that it's something that I have to, really contain, because not only does it, as I said, spike my anxiety, but I realize that it can kind of radiate out into other people, particularly, running a spa, which is around a bunch of empaths. I have to be extra careful about that. It's a little easier on the tech side, but sometimes I'll have a very stressful day here at American Underground, and I'll walk down to the spa and try to have a meeting. And I'm just like, oh, these are different tones. Like, I have got to just rein it back.
Yeah.
And then, I think the big picture focus is kind of always been where I am. That's, I think, why I've always liked the startup world. I've always been really drawn to the ability to just figure stuff out. And I think that that's probably where I do feel more accurate in my self-confidence, is you can give me a problem and I'll figure out how to do it. I don't know that my first answer is going to be right, but I've always been able to just kind of get that path. And I think it's because I can see something that feels really big and, overwhelming to a lot of people, and I can start to understand how it can get broken down into achievable milestones and a lot of the things I'm not good at. And so I really enjoy the ability to kind of delegate people to those more detail-oriented items.
Quick question for you, Lauren, before we leave this slide and go to the kryptonite. When you talked about the delegation piece, and I'd say that your pattern, your readout certainly supports that.
It does.
How have you dealt with that, being a solopreneur? And when you're on your own and it's your show, who do you delegate to? I mean, you look over here and you look over there and you're like, oh, I guess it's me. How has that, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think there's a big part of it that's it is just to suck it up, right? And I think for me, I can usually get over it when I connect it to the greater objective. So when I realize, so I'll use an example, right? So let's say a client brought me on and they're trying to figure out, how did you top a funnel, right? I hate doing any type of cold calling, but man, do you learn a lot, right? And so I can connect that even as much as I hate that activity, that my learning objectives from doing that activity are actually quite high. And so as long as I can convince myself of that in my head, I can usually get over it. But it is challenging, especially because doing that type of work in a startup, there's not really a thing that is scope. Like scope doesn't really exist. And so, it was challenging sometimes. And sometimes I would hate the things I had to be responsible for if I couldn't make that connection.
Yeah.
And that comfortableness with ambiguity is serving you well here, because there are some folks who find themselves in startups who are very structured and detail oriented, which has its place because they build structure and stuff with them, but there's not a lot built. And so there's a high anxiety from where's the training manual? Where's the training videos? Where's my sales sheets for these 7 different audiences? They don't exist.
Roadmap.
Yeah, roadmap. Yeah, exactly. The roadmap's in the investor deck, and that's all bullshit anyway. So, all right,
kryptonite. So on the occasion where the pressure's on and stress is high, I don't know, when you're maybe waiting on the next sub to show up for the construction work, and your tension goes up, superpower becomes kryptonite. Talk us through these bullets.
Yeah, I think that I brought this up a minute ago, but kind of on like this assertive for female leader, I think that, and I've talked to other female leaders about the same thing, is that, and I don't know what is sociologically things that have been entrenched to us, but right, it's that whole, like, I have to be loud enough to be heard. And I sometimes have to be loud enough that I'm comfortable with. And then I have to go back to my normal self and think, was that too loud? Was I too much? Right. And it's this self-confidence of not knowing what's right to do. And also recognizing that in certain situations, like, you can be deemed as like too much. And a lot of times I've had situations, like I had a past situation at a former role of mine where I still hold to this day, if I was a male, I would have been treated so much differently about the way I interjected my opinions. Like, and I saw it play out in front of my eyes. And I don't think it was intentionally like a sexist type of agenda, but it is, right? Because females are supposed to listen and absorb information and go do tasks for people, not speak up and be influential. And it's hard, I think, to get in that level where, like, we look at, like, Oprah, I'll just pick like an extreme example, right? And we know that she's so influential, right? And then you have people who have no influence, and then everyone else in the middle ends up in this awkward zone where you're like, are they too much? Are they enough? Are they just too passive? Are they too loud? And so I think that it's a challenge that pretty much every female founder I've talked to has experienced in one way or another.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yep. And so, the done yesterday, again, I kind of alluded to some of these too. I think that one of the things I'm really trying to do as a leader is not leak that out, but I don't know that I do a good job of it, because it is, like, especially in tech, it is this high pace, intense environment, right? Where it does feel like everything should have been done yesterday. And it does feel like there's opportunity cost with every delay. And so I think for me, dealing with it myself is challenging, but understanding, again, back to the before item, right? Like it's a place to blame on yourself. Like, how can I be a better leader and not let some of that leak into how my team functions? And then, so I always say that, like, if I could, at least I believe that if I could shift one thing about myself, I wish I was more detail oriented, right? Because that's always supposed to be a trait you want, but it's just not how my brain functions. And so I've been pretty good at recognizing that. And so, whether it's, we're going to be bringing on a VA on our team to help with some of those detail orientations. It's using tools, using, better task management stuff to try to take care of that, because I know that I fully appreciate them and know how critical they are. But I've also learned to recognize within my own career that that's not where I thrive necessarily.
Yeah. Go.
Lauren, we have something in common in that we run a business with our spouse. All right. Now, I have just one that I, run with.
Spouse you're talking about.
Yeah. And
clarifying for our slower viewers.
Yes. Just one business that I run
Right.
with my spouse. You've got this business that you run with your partner, and then you've got, your consulting, and then you've got this trauma thing that you're firing up. And done yesterday, and driving and assertive. How challenging is it when you're stepping from trauma to the spa, or from consulting to the spa, and you're going from calling your own shots and running a show to maybe to, working with her, and done yesterday versus the way that she leads? And, have you two been able to handle that? As Amy and I, with running our business, and then, having a marriage and those things, it's hard sometimes not
Oh
to
yeah.
drag one conversation across another and have that completely, knock things astray.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I think that, Cass and I have, by and large, well, I would say this: we're really good at appreciating what each other is good at, and I think that that's a really good start. Because
Yes.
what happens is, like, even if something gets really stressful in the moment, the ability to take a step back and recognize, okay, that was my strength at play and your strength at play, and if we would have only had the conversation and a better appreciation of that, everything would have been fine. And it typically keeps things from ever escalating into anything a problem, but that doesn't mean the reactions change, right? So, like, my stress is really high in the morning, and her stress is, I don't know, I feel like she's just like coffee, like nothing in the world functions till coffee. And so sometimes we'll come up and I'll be up before, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we didn't respond to this thing that actually doesn't really matter, but in my mind it's like urgently in behind. And so I try to take the moment to recognize, like, if I tell her that right now, this is going to now create a division in the way that we lead. And often, like, I put that on myself, that I should have held that, right? I should have held that to the afternoon when she was ready to take action on things. And also just that we run at different paces. Like, I'm used to multitasking to a high degree, and this is new to her, right? She's been a massage therapist her whole life. And so she's like, focus, present, do what I'm doing. And it's interesting. Like, and that's probably why I tell her to do most of the interactions with their team, because I'm like, you all are your own breed of people. I'm going to make sure everything's still running over here. But it is hard not to leak, and it's hard to have a dinner without talking about work.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yes.
that's always a tricky one too.
Yeah. Yeah.
We start with wine. A lot of wine.
Exactly.
No.
No?
No, not for me
Okay.
anyway.
John says no.
That works for us too.
So we're going to apply these leadership lessons, right? You took the assessment, you did the pre-show work with John. We talked over a superpower and kryptonite slides. How do you take the analysis of this and what we discussed today, and apply it to leading, I don't know, the 13 or 14 businesses you're running?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, and right, that's why any of these assessments are always helpful, because it kind of bubbles up some self-awareness about items that maybe you kind of knew but didn't have the words for, or didn't have the association with. And so I think, one of the things that, kind of is topical for where my head is right now is this idea of my tendency to have things done yesterday, right? My tendency to have things move fast and expecting that everyone's going to juggle what I have is a strength, but it's not where everyone else functions. And what happens is, by them sacrificing that strength, they bring a lot of other things to the table. And so that's the balance, I think, that I'm trying to strike. And, like, one of the things I need to start doing in my regular basis is figuring out how to properly check myself with that. And I think the challenge is trying to check yourself in the moment and recognizing when there's a need for a third party to help mediate that. Not that it needs a mediator, but sometimes people could be talking two different languages when they're in a high stress environment.
Yeah, one of the things we say in the work Will and I do is, oftentimes conflict shows up at the context stage, not at content. Because, for example, people on the right, like me and you, we are storytellers. We like to persuade. We like to paint pictures with our words. People on Will's side, the more technical, analytical side, say, send me the spreadsheet. And they hate being sold. And so if you have a situation where you're over persuading and the other person's like, what? Like, you don't even get to the topic. you're stuck at the context. So
Yeah.
that's smart that you see through that. Will?
Yeah, you're communicating a message they're not receiving.
Yeah.
And then you both leave the exchange frustrated because they just shut down on you.
Yeah.
And you think you got your point across and it was completely lost.
Yeah. And the more stressful the environment, I think the more relevant that becomes.
Well, there's nothing more stressful than running a small business. And so, it'll test you, but you two sound like a good balance for one another, and you really need that. Particularly for someone who, massage therapy being her passion and now has started a business like that. You often see that, dentists love being dentists, but they don't love being business people. Doctors love being doctors and helping patients, but they don't love the minutia of the business. They need to have someone, a partner or a management company or someone to outsource those things to, so that they can do what they love, or they will no longer love the business because they'll drown in the minutia.
100%. And same thing, right? Is like, if you try to run, especially something that this requires that level of like depth and human interaction. If you had two me's, first of all, we would burn each other out. It'd be exhausting. Everyone would need a nap all the time. But also, like, you would lose that human connection because she's able to translate like an objective into like an emotion in a way that I just can't. And I think that that's what's really cool about people that have that characteristic and being able to, I don't know, like there's this just ability to connect with people that's really cool and can't be taught.
She brought up a great point, John. I think we should add a segment to the show. We're typically recording around 2:30 in the afternoon. I've had lunch. I get a little sleepy. Can we have a nap time segment? Like
naps. Who's naps?
Yeah.
All right, Lauren, you told us in the pre-show that you actually have been workshopping this. Who do you got for us?
Yeah, so I think that I would probably like to nominate my friend Molly McKinley. So she has a PR agency. She also has a tea business. So you get someone else with two different businesses at once. She's been in the entrepreneur ecosystem for longer than I have, working at different companies, doing really great marketing work. Great friend of mine, a lot of cool things to say. So I think she'd be a great fit.
Molly, you'll be hearing from us soon, and we're going to talk all about Lauren.
Yeah, Molly's cool. She's good people.
She's great.
That's our show, Lauren. Thanks for being on.
So much fun, Lauren. Really enjoyed it.
Long time in waiting. I think we talked about 11 years ago. So getting you here is terrific. I'm John Lane.
I'm Will Barfield.
And we are
a work in progress.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Lauren, awesome.
Thanks.
Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.